To me, the ocean's a creature. And this creature is amazing. It hosts so many other creatures within it. It feeds any creature on the planet, from humans to birds to the sea life it lives in. It produces jewels that we love to wear, like pearls. It gives us money. It gives us food. It even gives us that emotional and spiritual connection.
Hello and welcome back. It's great to be here with you today. I appreciate so much those of you that have sent in kindness after hearing about my father's death. This conversation was recorded in liminal space just a few days before he left. I want to say an amazing thank you to our team, Anna Greta Folderbach and Mary Chan, who have been amazing during these weeks that I've been slightly less present than normal to the production side of the podcast. And I've been really grateful that everything has kind of ticked along. Yeah, and that we just have this incredible team. So before we get to today's conversation, I haven't thanked any new patrons since the end of series 3. And so I have quite a list today. I'd like to thank Lucy White, Marlise Gabriel, Paolo Becerra, Jim Muma, Thomas Adams, Teresa Sherrington, Susan Harley, Ione Mitria, Beryl Wiseman, Kiran Ahmed, Rebecca Gauchi, Amy Mason, Faith Agugu, Carol Perry, Kathy Eastburn, Rachel Millwood, Ali Dowling, Gabby Morris, Tomoko Shibamoto, Amanda Speedman, Diego Mier y Tiran, John Archdeacon, Leslie Howard, Lulu Kubel, Suman Barthakur, and Jamie Bird. Thank you to each one of you for supporting the show, and to each of you listening now for co-creating this. We really can't do it without patrons and presence members, so it means a lot when you show up for us like this. My guest today is an inspiring woman I met at the Global Peace Initiative of Women Conference in Varanasi last year. Reem AlMealla is a nature lover, a marine biologist, and a climate advocate, originating from the island of Bahrain, located in the youngest and the hottest sea of the planet, the Arabian Gulf. Reem is one of the first Bahraini women marine biologists who works on the field. She has spent the last 10 years working on reefs and other marine ecosystems in Bahrain, Indonesia, Madagascar, the Seychelles, and South Africa. Her work includes studying the change in fish behavior in response to changes in their ecosystems, reef carbonate budgets, which is an indicator as to whether reefs can keep up with rising sea levels as a consequence of climate change, and the genetic diversity of the coral symbiont across different thermal regimes. Over 2.4 billion people, 40% of the world's population, live within 100 kilometers of the coast, some of which depend on the ocean for their livelihoods. Reem spends her days contributing towards building the knowledge needed to conserve and manage reefs that ensure island stability, and is the lifeline of billions around the world. She has also just completed her PhD. She invests a lot of her free time in creating foundations for platforms that never existed in the Arab world for future generations. She created the first national biodiversity database in Bahrain and was co-founder of the Arab Youth Climate Movement, the first platform of its kind in the MENA region for Arab youth to come together to address climate issues. Reem is determined to contribute towards creating the necessary shift in the region to bring environmental protection, conservation, climate justice, and their connection to human spirit into the world's priority list. In this conversation, we talk a lot about privilege, racism, and resilience. We also explore the question, will our transformation be guided by the oceans? I hope that you enjoy this episode. Welcome to The Future is Beautiful, with me, your host, Amisha Gadiali. On this show, we explore the weave between politics, spirituality, creativity, and sustainability. It's time for us to move beyond silos and into an integrated way of being. Every one of us has ideas and personal experiences to share that can lead us to a brighter future. This is The Revolution, Despite the challenges we face as a global community or the pressures that we meet in our daily lives, when we stop and dare to dream, to ask ourselves the big questions and to share what we are already doing, we create the future that we wish to wake up for. That future is beautiful. Reem, I am absolutely delighted to welcome you to The Future is Beautiful.
Thank you for having me. It's such an honor.
It's a pleasure. I have very fond memories of us being in Varanasi last year, around this time, maybe a bit earlier in the year, being there for the Global Peace Initiative of Women. We had this wonderful few days of exploring the feminine in relation to the earth and justice, and then being in the setting of Varanasi. I did actually do a few interviews, but they disappeared. So that wasn't meant to be shared at that time. But I have this memory of, in so many of the discussions, hearing you say, "That's privilege." And it like rings in my ears like a soundbite, hearing you say actually multiple times, like, "That's privilege." And I feel like where we're at right now, where there's a growing interest in understanding the systems of white supremacy and the way that these systems of oppression affect our world, I just kept hearing like, oh, let's have Reem come and explain to us how she has experienced privilege. So if you would like to share that with us, I would love that as our opening.
Thank you. Yes, that word is something that all my life has been the center of awareness. Coming from a very small island in the Arabian Gulf, one of the smallest countries in the world, actually, Bahrain, originally made out of, it's an archipelago made out of 33 islands surrounded by sea. And the name itself, Bahrain, means the two seas. That's a literal translation. Owing to the salt water meeting the fresh water, the combination of two opposite things coming together, like different energies where you have light and dark because you can't have one without the other. And that center that you can't really tell, it's kind of like, to me, when the clock is at 11:59 with 59 seconds in the midnight, that millisecond in between that no one notices, no one feels, and you can't really tell where the difference is between today and yesterday, or tomorrow and today. And knowing and being able to choose to be in that moment is privilege to me. It's something you don't see, but is there. Something that you miss, but when you're aware of it, you could feel it. And it is being able to recognize when we are in that center, which to me is the word privilege. Because being centered is a privilege, because to be able to sit down and quieten the world is privilege to me. Because a lot of people, some lucky people, might be able to do that. But most of us spend our lives chasing gurus, going to retreats, studying, trying to find that moment of peace. As an ecologist who's interested in understanding the interaction between all living beings in the world, how we interact, how we're connected, and really bringing us to the full circle of life, is privilege. To be able to be born into this world to do this, especially in this crucial time. Being born in Bahrain, although it's an island, strangely, when I started understanding how people choose their paths, I realized that being able to study environmental science and ecology and marine biology was not something open to people like me, even though we come from an island surrounded by sea, by reefs that have fed generations and all our ancestors. It got me thinking. And I remember when I was in secondary school, when they asked us what we wanted to do, and they were trying to organize some meetings with people. I said I wanted to do marine biology. And they were like, oh, that doesn't even exist. And I said, well, it does, because I watched Free Willy a couple of years ago. Literally, I kid you not. And there is this one phrase where the lead lady, where the boy asks her, what are you going to do now after they free Willy? And she turned around and said, I think I'm going to go back to university and do a PhD in marine biology. And that term just clicked in my head. And I thought, what is that?
And here we are. You are freshly completed PhD in marine biology.
Exactly. And it's amazing because at the time, as a 15-year-old, I never thought it would be possible, coming from a household where both my parents never really went to university. Well, they didn't go. My father never went to school. My father is mainly illiterate. It was only when we were born and started going to school that he joined night school to be able to read and write. And even then, we would do his homework and my homework together. I mean, he still struggles, but he tries, and that's when I realized my privilege, that my father and my mother didn't pursue the dreams or the opportunity to seek the education they really wanted, but sacrificed both their lives to ensure that we could read and write and pursue the education that they never had a chance to. And that's where I realized I was privileged. When I asked my father what was his dream as a child, he said to me was to have a family. Because he came from, let's just say, a very difficult background whereby he had a father that was not there and a mother who was from another country and sent back to that country. And he grew up on the streets. Of course, he'd go to whatever people would call home, but it wasn't a home. And so his dream was to have a home. And he worked all his life to have a family and a home. And that's when I realized I was more than privileged. And so bringing us to that 15-year-old who said I wanted to do marine biology, and the teachers were like, oh, don't even know how to deal with this girl. I went to girls' school, and I had the questions that everybody was like, why is she asking all these questions? Can't you just be like every other girl? I was like, no, I don't understand, And before I wanted to be a marine biologist, I really wanted to be an astronaut, actually, because I was fascinated about what's beyond the skies. But obviously, that was not even something people would think of. So yeah, that just made me realize things need to change. And then finally, through an interesting situation, they found a marine biologist that I could meet. They organized this meeting, and I went into the office. And of course, the entire office was white. Everyone that ran the environmental sector in Bahrain, it's run by the majority of white people. And then I was wondering why the locals weren't there.
And not even one local.
Exactly.
Maybe bringing tea or something.
Yeah, exactly. And that was exactly it. It was the chai boy and the driver. I was thinking, but what about the scientists? And it was so hard to find someone. So I had no role model, leave alone like a woman. A man would have been enough. A local man to make me feel capable of achieving.
And bridging that gap between the importance of local knowledge and also expert knowledge, that gets so missed out when everyone's flown in from Europe and America to tell another country how to do it.
Yeah, and also it's interesting because when you go to the fishermen and you go to the local coast communities, whenever you ask them, why do you think something is like this? And they would come from a more cultural storytelling part. But what the Western experts would say, these people are all dumb. But the thing is, they're not dumb. They just see things in another way, but the end result is exactly the same. So when they say, oh, we shouldn't be going out because, for example, the ocean energy is angry. In terms of science, you just have a storm brewing because they could see the winds and analyze the weather forecast. But the locals could feel it in their bones. They knew something was angry. And to them, it was the ocean having its moment. As locals, you respect the ocean, you let it have its moment, and your job is to stay on land and admire this amazing, to me, the ocean's a creature. And this creature is amazing. It hosts so many other creatures within it. It feeds any creature on the planet, from humans to birds to the sea life it lives in. It produces jewels that we love to wear, like pearls, gives us money, it gives us food. It even gives us that emotional and spiritual connection. So a lot of people, when they're upset, everybody goes, they seek the blue. And yet, that connection that we have lost as people, we've really lost that. And especially in a place like Bahrain, where they're reclaiming the sea, they're reclaiming land. They like to call it land reclamation, which is burying the sea to create land, artificial islands turned into resorts for people's pleasure and Instagram photos because it looks amazing and it'll give me more likes. But what they're really doing is burying their own essence. Exactly. And that's reflecting exactly the way we live our life, burying the real us, trying to create these unnatural ways for people to perceive us as that perfect thing that society would like, so we can blend in, look nice, be rich, live an unreal life. What's wrong with the normal beaches? What's wrong with normal land? What's wrong with living in a hut? Why does it have to be this fancy resort? And this is what makes me laugh. They build these artificial lands and resorts just to have a fancy hut. But you can build that fancy hut on the normal beach. Why do we have to go and reclaim the ocean? But again, the ocean speaks back. And that's exactly what climate change is doing. The sea level is rising. And as sea level rises, it will reclaim back what was taken away. And in this journey of where man's ego has grown so huge that it's so blinded by the warnings, because nature is kind, nature is compassionate, and nature is patient. Because she could wake up one day and go, you know what, I'll just wipe you out. Easy. She's done that so many times. But she always gives us warnings. And even in this era of COVID-19, it is nature speaking. But the question is, are we listening? So that privilege of being educated, that privilege of being able to choose the diet that we would like to follow or adopt in our life, being able to choose the food. And that's another thing that segregates us from nature. In nature, there is all the different beings on the planet do not follow one diet. Because even nature has made sure within its circle of life, every group has its niche. And even within that niche, they're allowed to be flexible. So one thing I did during my time, obviously I am a marine biologist and a researcher, but over the last couple of years, I've done a lot of different research. And one of the things I did was studying the behavior of butterfly fish, like 4 species of butterfly fish, on different reef qualities, because I wanted to understand whether butterfly fish of these particular 4 species change their behavior as the quality of the reefs decrease. So as food becomes more scarce, as the corals are dying off, for various reasons, whether it's anthropogenic or not, do they change their diet? And what was interesting is I chose 4 different species. So one of them was an obligate corallivore, so they eat nothing but corals. Then you've got the generalists, that they will eat whatever they find. And you've got some that are mostly obligate corallivores, but if there's an opportunity, they would go for something else. Kind of like, say, us humans. You've got the vegetarians, you've got the vegans, you've got the normal carnivores, you've got whatever, the flexitarians, the pescatarians, the diversity. And what's interesting is that I noticed that the obligate corallivores, when the reef quality was degrading and the coral colonies were decreasing, they refuse to change their diet. Now, mind you, I must say, like, this study that I did was on a short-term basis. It wasn't like years and years to collect that data. But from the short observation, you could see, comparing those sites, that that particular species began to disappear in numbers as the reef quality decreased. But they started becoming more aggressive towards each other.
Interesting.
It's like, no, I will not be flexible, but that means a lot of my people are going to die off. But then I will fight against my own people because I need to survive. So the aggression was more. And what was interesting is that their territory size was growing. So they no longer were content with having their normal size, small colonies, small territories. They started having bigger territories and chasing away others when they'd come. It was really interesting. Like, they would try to chase me away, which I thought was quite funny in a way, because this little tiny little fish who's trying to get you out, and you're just sitting there going, this is amazing. Obviously, not from a perspective of, I am a big human and you're a little fish, but it's more kind of like, wow, that fish is no longer looking at, is this enemy big or small? It's more about, I am surviving it and I will be as aggressive as I need to be. And it was just so interesting. Whereas the flexible ones kept being flexible, quite chill.
Right. Because I used to be really into scuba diving and in my 20s. And I guess just because of, as I started to do a lot more yoga, the time and the resources, I haven't been diving much for years. But I remember that most of the fish would be, they just check you out, check out your energy. But yeah, you didn't get much aggression. And so I'm curious to know if that's changed in the last 10, 15 years.
Yeah, and it's so interesting and also an indicator, and that's why it just makes me think, even when we look at ourselves and we try to say, as a collective, contribute towards healing Earth, right? Healing nature, or giving it the space to heal. Like, nature doesn't need us in that sense, but we need it. And hence we have to work on healing ourselves to be able to heal everything around us. But what I always find interesting with groups is that they all care about the same thing. Everybody cares, well, not everybody, but like most people who are aware cares about nature and they want to do something about it. Yet, if there is one thing me and you don't agree on, there will be aggression. It's so interesting that why is it that we cannot look at it from a brighter side, and say, okay, maybe it's all about adapting to the situation. When I am in a position of privilege, why don't I use that privilege to help others, whether it's through making time to help people access education, whether it's through material ways of helping, giving money, donating, whatever. But when I am privileged and everybody around me is privileged, then It's about recognizing what we as a group have, identifying the groups within us that are less privileged. And then when I say less privileged, yet we're all privileged, is by identifying the different places. Because at the moment, say, I'm privileged in terms of being able to choose my diet and, say, accessing education. But I'm not privileged in terms of being able to access fellowships, for example, to pursue my research in Bahrain, because my passport never qualifies me for anything. So yes, I've accessed the education. Yes, I can eat what I want. But no, I can't conduct research in my own country without fellowships and funding, but my passport does not qualify me. Whereas all my colleagues who I've just finished my PhD with are in a completely different realm. They have no issues applying to any fellowship in the world. They can go wherever they want to do their postdoc, and I'm here trying to keep my head above the water.
And wanting to go and actually bring the knowledge of your education into your home country.
Exactly. And it's one of the things I'm already trying to just find a door. Like, I'm moving actually back to the island next week to set up those little new dreams. And the question is, and I still ask myself every night I go to bed, how is it going to happen? And the only thing that keeps me going is that faith that the universe is on my side and that there will be a door that will open. But again, privilege. So in this world that we're living at the moment, the Black Lives Matter movement, this whole white supremacy, dismantling of what's the whole system. It's a broken system, isn't it?
For sure.
A broken system that a lot of people are afraid of even speaking about it because everyone's uncomfortable. But then whoever said that growth and change is comfortable? Whoever said that we should be comfortable to change? And are we ready? Are we ready to swim in the ocean when there's a current? At the moment, we're all stuck in a current, flowing in one direction, and just hoping that it's going to change direction soon.
Yeah, it's interesting because this time and with COVID and just everything else that's swirling, it's like everything rising to the surface of the ocean. And as you were talking about privilege and adaptability, it's like if you have privilege, technically it should be easier to be more adaptable. But in fact, in the system that we have, it's those without privilege or with less privilege that are forced to adapt in radical, constant ways. If we look at the impacts of the global lockdowns and the economic impacts, that has radically changed the lives of many, many people that didn't have very much to start with, and they've had to find ways to adapt. And we see how a lot of the climate disasters that we're having are ending up having much deeper impacts again on countries that don't have the same level of resources to kind of bail everyone out. And yeah, often people just have to adapt within that system. And then it's really interesting because many people, that I'm in contact with had to adapt during this time, but it's been like adapting to using Zoom rather than meeting up with people in person, or it's adapting to being at home with your family and your kids rather than getting to go to the office, and people saying about how they can't wait so they can go and get a fancy latte again, and these kind of like levels of adapting. And I don't, I do feel like we can't measure pain and discomfort and trauma, because when that affects one's body, it affects one's body. And so I know a lot of people that have financial privilege during this time, but are really suffering on an emotional mental health level and do not have the resources of like family, community, that other people that maybe don't have the financial resources for this time, they have a rich resource of community and laughter and, you know, and kind of practices and rituals and kind of ways to at least stay connected in the heart. And so I feel like we're all riding these different intersections of trauma and privilege and marginalization, and we're all navigating our way through this current that is going really fast, and we're not even sure we want to go in that direction. In fact, we're pretty sure we don't. I'm curious as to, yeah, how we navigate that.
You've literally hit the nail in the head, Amisha. You know, you can't measure those levels of privilege because there's so many different levels within levels, if that makes sense. Like,
Yeah.
one thing that I always tell myself is something a lot of, I'm sure you've heard of this before as a diver. When you encounter a current, either get close to the reef or get close to the bottom. Because then you're not dragged.
Mm-hmm.
So we try and center that energy and wait. But in that waiting, you're not wasting time, because you would have been wasting time if you didn't try and center, because then you'd be again pulled even further back. But what you're doing is you're harnessing what you have and helping it grow, so that when the current changes, you've prepared, and suddenly it'll be a full blowout. And then you wouldn't have to go panic mode, I haven't prepared, and things are moving. But instead, you have been preparing. You have things ready. You've sown the seeds, and now the current has changed to help it grow, to help it get to the top.
I like, in that analogy as you're speaking, I kind of see that, you know, it can be scary to go to the bottom because the sea gets darker and darker and you don't know like what's down there. And then of course, you know, you might get knocked on the way.
Exactly.
So it can feel like that's scary to dive deep into the moment that you're in. But then actually, if you can have the courage to go deep down and to wait and gather and observe and to really be fully in the storm, but from a vista that you can wait it out and observe what's happening from, then how much you would then have to bring back to the surface.
Yes, totally. It is scary, of course. And obviously, like, when we go to the bottom, naturally, when, say, if you are in the sea, when you know it's going to be a really deep one, you wouldn't, right? So you'll try and stay where you are, because no one knows you better than you. So you stay where you are. And if you can see the bottom, then that's all you need to encourage you to go to the bottom, because you can see it. But if you're not ready and you can't see it, then that's okay to stay where you are and work with what you have. Because when you are at that point, then I also believe that the universe knows whether you need to be forcibly pulled down. And then we would be taken into that journey. And then our natural reflexes will work with it. So this is where the element of trust comes in. Trust in each other and trust ourselves. And that's why, as a collective, we're a community, really, because we discuss and we talk and we have these beautiful conversations, because there is that element of trust. Even if we don't agree with each other, there is that circle of trust that will allow you to express, that would allow you to, in your expression, analyze what's happening. And then you might change your perspective and maybe something new might arise from it. And I think that's the beauty. And I think this is what's happening right now. when it comes to the movement and the energy and all that anger for years that's been suppressed and oppressed, and things that we can say is suddenly coming up into that surface. The currents come and we're all like, oof, around the world, really, not just America. It's through these conversations that we identify our level of expression, right? And what's going on in our mind. Because sometimes when we think, there's so many thoughts, so many experiences that we have been experiencing. But once we verbalize things, we can see things a bit more clearly rather than 10,000 thoughts that go through the mind. The tongue cannot give you 10,000 words in one phrase. So you have to somehow think about what comes out and then listen to yourself and learn from it. At the moment, the current has changed with everything that's happening. And you can see all the anger that's been suppressed for years, all the oppression that so many communities around the world have faced for years on end. It's finally rising up. And finally, you're hearing all these stories, and they're horrifying that this has even happened in this time and age where we consider ourselves as societies that are civilized.
And at the same time, it's also surprising that people are surprised when
exactly
our entire global system is built off colonization, when every person of color lives with racism constantly, and then people are surprised that that's something that's still happening.
Totally. But again, it is also that privilege, I keep using that word, but it is, isn't it? I was speaking to a friend of mine and she said to me, oh, I don't understand how people can be so racist. Like, my children don't see color. And I didn't think about it much when we were having a chat. And later I came home and I was reflecting on our conversation, because I have faced so much racism, like many other people of color. Even just growing up with people giving me whitening soap as birthday gifts, and people saying, no one's going to marry you because everyone's trying to improve their genetics, so the offsprings look nice, So you're probably going to have someone really so hideous, because that's all you're going to get. And then both of you can just go and get rid of the way you look, kind of that kind of attitude. And then you grow up.
Is that because your skin is a darker tone to others in your community?
Yeah, it's a darker tone, because in the Middle East, there is also that outlook. The fairer you are, the more beautiful you are. You look into the magazine. We have
that in India as well.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the more the Eastern you go, it's more normal for people to be like, oh, and I hate this brand, the Fair and Lovely brand.
Oh yeah, the Fair and Lovely.
Fair and Lovely. Like, everybody needs Fair and Lovely.
In every auntie's cupboard.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, hey, I brought you Fair and Lovely. This is the latest edition. It also gets rid of this. And you're like, oh, yeah. Lovely. Yeah.
For our friends listening, we're talking about bleach in a beautiful packet.
Yeah. Yes, literally.
That goes on the face.
On the face, that's it. And you get whitening soaps and all of the different things. So you're conditioned as a child growing up that you are not beautiful as a woman. So leave the whole aspect of trying to get an education and all the things that you need to make it in the world, to understand the world. But you as an individual growing with your emotions, trying to find yourself, trying to build your personality and your character. And you've got all these unrealistic things that are shoved on a child, again, like reclaiming land. You are building a human to not recognize themselves. Bury it, hide it, because you're not worthy to be of this world, because you don't fit those standards.
Yeah. And as children, we don't have the capacity to just say, but I'm here, so I am of this world. We don't have in our societies that sense of our innate worth.
Exactly. And then you question yourself when you're an adult. Can I get that job? I remember a couple of times I went and I had a job interview and someone said, "You're not going with your hair like that, are you? You're going to go straighten it, right?" Because having curly, wavy, frizzy hair and you're dark skinned means you're ugly. If you want to be someone that people would actually hire, kindly go straighten your hair. And I was conditioned for years to straighten my hair. And I struggle with that. Like if I go to big conferences and stuff, I always do. And it was one of the conversations I was having in Varanasi actually with one of the girls. And they're like, "You shouldn't be straightening your hair." I was like, "Oh, you don't understand. It's such a struggle for me just to wake up and go, okay, today I'm just going out like this. It's a conference, but it's not formal. So it's okay." And to convince yourself to be comfortable.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I went through these initiations. I always also used to straighten my hair. I'm so happy about the hours of my life that I've reclaimed. And then I don't know when it was exactly. At some point, actually, in my teen years, I started to sometimes let it be curly. I realized how curly it was. Yeah, I don't know when the last time I straightened my hair was. I think it might be over 10 years ago. I don't even know where my hair straighteners are. The interesting thing is that actually when we were in Varanasi, our friend Manish Jain, who's been on the show, he looked at the artwork. I think I had a flyer of the podcast and I have really straight hair in that picture. And he looked at me and he said, "Why have you got this photo here? Like, are you ashamed of your curly hair?" And the funny thing is it happened totally by accident. It wasn't that I straightened my hair to have that photo. It was that the podcast was launching whilst I was doing a crazy job that was 18-hour days. And so I hadn't had much time to like set everything up. And so then I'd asked a friend to just take a picture, but it just wasn't coming out with the right background. And then I had gone for my one haircut of the year. I've got really bad with getting my hair cut. And so my hair was straight. And then that morning, the podcast was launching that day and I didn't have an image. And I called a friend that was a photographer. And I said, could we do a photo like right now? And so then I had straight hair. And it's just really funny because it kind of actually, I've been meaning to replace it, but I just haven't had the chance to. I had the right picture or whatever. But then there is something about it that's like, oh, is this more presentable somehow?
Yeah, no, completely relate to that. Totally. And well done you for being able to break free because I'm still on that journey of trying to completely embrace. I think I've made progress. I've definitely made a lot of progress, but I'm still not there 100%. It just makes you realize that in addition to the normal battles that you go through in life to make it, and when I say make it, is living your purpose, but you also have to go through those battles internally of how society has conditioned you because you were born in a certain place with a certain skin color. The entire conditioning is to be white because then only if you can look white, act white, don't be embarrassing, don't eat with your hands, don't be this, don't do that. And constantly trying to reach those unrealistic expectations and at the same time erasing your culture, erasing who you are to fit into that box. And that's sad.
Yeah.
Reflecting the sad world we live in.
Yeah, and so many people in so many like different scenarios in this world have buried their essence in order to be vanilla.
Yeah, totally.
Although I feel like that's disrespectful to vanilla because it's an excellent flavor of ice cream.
It is, isn't it? Yes. It is.
But yeah, like it's so sad how that there are not many humans that are living a liberated life. I feel for sure that so many of the answers to the question, you know, how do we co-create a beautiful future? Like, how do we not go down this current so fast? Is like, well, let's all be who we are. Let go of a lot of the ideas and that it has to be this way that we have become so accustomed to. And for me, that's really why the spiritual aspect and the healing of the subconscious aspect for me is all part of activism, because I don't think we can meaningfully get anywhere if we aren't prepared to shed those layers in ourselves.
Exactly. And this is the harnessing part, isn't it? Where we are now in the current. That is the self-love, self-discovery, forgiveness, forgiving ourselves, the way we've beaten ourselves up for not being who we are because we were conditioned to do something in particular. I remember when I was 18 and I just started my degree, I used to work at Subway making sandwiches, and I was the only brown girl in the team. There was this old man who walked in and he said, "Can I have someone else serve me, please?" And then my manager had said, "Oh, what, she can serve you, sir." And he said, "Yeah, but I don't want her brown hands to touch my sandwich. I don't want to have to eat that." It was such a strange experience that at 18, when you're already going through so much, trying to establish yourself as a person, understanding who you are, and then someone telling you, "Oh, you touching something because you've got brown hands means you're dirty."
And this was in England?
Yes, this was in England. And interestingly, at the time, no one said anything. My colleague served the old man. I obviously went to hide because I just couldn't understand how I was feeling, actually. Looking back, I was confused, but I was ashamed to be brown. But I remember that all my colleagues after the man left came to apologize. And now looking back, I realized they didn't know how to deal with the situation. But they were like, "We're sorry it happened." And I remember my manager said to me, "If you don't want to come into work for the next few days, that's okay." And I actually didn't go for a whole week because I just couldn't face serving people at that moment. I was too scared. And then finally, there was a girl, she was so kind, Rosie, and she came to me and she said, "I'm really angry. I didn't say anything and I'm really sorry. And I don't know what to do." And at the time, we were both really young. We didn't know what to do, and all we could do is her being my friend, being there, and me pretending it didn't happen. And you move on. But it was something that's always stayed with me, even now. And you wonder, is the future going to be different? And then I like to believe that it will, because we are speaking out now. We have beautiful platforms like this one where we're sharing these experiences for these stories to come out. And like you said, people are still surprised. This still happens. But why are you surprised?
Yeah, totally. I mean, how many years ago was that?
This was around 2000 and 2006, between 2006 2007. It was that year.
And these things still happen. I know that people my parents' age, they wouldn't get served in chip shops and all kinds of things. And now it's like you're allowed in, but you can't, you don't know what you're going to have to put up with, and in these microaggressions. And I think what breaks my heart is that man that said that to you missed the opportunity to meet this revolutionary young lady who had made her way from Bahrain against all odds to England to study to be a marine biologist. He would have been so lucky to have had his sandwich made by you. And he could have had an amazing conversation with you whilst he was waiting for his sandwich.
I love the way you see it. Thank you for that.
You're redefining what's possible for young women in Bahrain and in many places around the world.
Thank you. I definitely try, and especially in Bahrain, to show young girls that it's possible, even when everyone tells you it's not. And I always talk about what people say. This happened just last year, actually. Not last year, the year before. I was in Bahrain for my field work. My PhD looked at 3 different reef systems in the Seychelles, Indonesia, and Bahrain. And I'd come out from the field and I went to a meeting at the local university. And the first comment that came out of somebody's mouth was, "Gosh, you're black?" And I said, yeah, I've been on the field for the last 4 months. Like, what did you expect me to be? Fair and lovely, you know? You know, like I've been working on a boat in the sea, diving every single day, covered in salt water and under the sun. Like, I'm sorry, like, what am I meant to be? I was just a bit annoyed that we were still talking about this. And I was like, can we talk about the science, please? And the results of my research. Funny thing is, then I decided to come to film a little video that would communicate what I'm trying to do in the country, because I was trying to raise some funding to help fund these expeditions. Where the minute it went up, people were sending me message, "Congratulations, the video is really interesting, what you're doing, but God, you look so black. You know, couldn't filmed it in the winter when your skin had like settled a bit."
Sorry.
Yeah, no, I was just like,
I don't know what else to do.
I don't know what to say. No, yeah, exactly. No, I was like, how do you even respond to this?
Yeah.
Honestly, I was just sitting there going, it's a shame there's no, like, the Instagram, when you don't want to respond, you just double tap and it gives you a like. I was like, don't I have that button in the WhatsApp message that I could do at the time? Like, you know, because how do you even respond to that? No, I'm really busy in the winter in the lab. I have no time to film. I'm sorry. And honestly, if my face bothers you in the color that it is, don't look at the screen. Just listen to me speak. Because in the end of the day, I'm not there for my looks. I'm there to communicate my science and my research and leave something for the future generation. Because A, I'm the first woman marine biologist in this country to work on the field. I'm your first local there in the sea doing what she's doing as a woman in this time. So can we just take a moment to think about how much I struggle going out just to come back to the show and people go, "Oh, couldn't you have filmed that in the winter when your skin had settled?" Well, I'm sorry, you know. In the winter, you just see my acne a bit more. So you need to choose between the two. Do you want the darker color that covers it all, you know, and I look actually much better in it? Or do you want my acne, you know, peeping out at you going, "Oh, hello," because I'm sure I'm going to get another message going, "Couldn't you put some foundation on because I don't wear makeup?"
Mm-hmm. And then the next call is like, "Could we just hire someone from Hollywood to play you in the summary of your research?"
Yeah, exactly, right? It's like, can we just like replace you? We can find a replacement. They do that all the time in Hollywood. Please do, as long as she knows what she's talking about. You know, put whatever face you would like. So it's just those little things, and you're just sitting here. So, you know, when we talk about like the entire dismantling this racist system that we come from or that we're living in, there are so many layers that sometimes I honestly don't know where to start.
Hello. We're taking a short pause from the conversation. On behalf of our team and our community, thank you for being here and co-creating The Future is Beautiful. Much dedication, love, and time goes into the production of this show. We believe in being advertising free in a world that's always trying to sell us stuff we don't need. And so we make this show with you and for you, thanks to your support. There are 3 ways you can be more involved, so we can share the vision, wisdom, and creativity here as we explore what it means to be a human in this time. You can support the podcast by sharing it with your friends, posting episodes on social media, and doing iTunes reviews. You can support as a patron by making a monthly or one-off donation of your choice. And with this, you join the global patrons group and monthly video calls where we share connection and insight. You get to know the other amazing patrons from around the world, their stories and their work, and you offer direct support to me and the team, as well as being brought into the behind the scenes of creating something like this. It sounds like a lot, but it's as much or as little as you want to get involved in. You can become a member of Presence, our membership collective of care and practice, where we explore how to embody the themes of the podcast with workshops, calls, special events, tree whispers, and powerful tools, practices, and rituals that you can bring into your life. This is open to absolutely everybody as we create an inclusive and diverse space that celebrates well-being as a human right, where we explore together what it means to be creative, courageous, and connected to ourselves, each other, and the earth. This is about embodying sacred activism. We love meeting patrons and Presence members and how being part in this way weaves our lives together, as well as making this show possible. If anything from this conversation has moved or inspired you, please get more involved. All information can be found at www.thefutureisbeautiful.co/community. This show really can't go on without your patronage and Presence membership, so please do make it happen. And now, back to the conversation. This thing that kind of kept coming up for me during the beginning of the pandemic, this phrase, like, how much beauty is there hiding in plain sight? In that context, it came up in terms of like foraging. So I was getting into like eating some of the wild plants that were around me. But as you were talking, it just came to me again. It's like what that man missed in the sandwich shop, what the people watching your research missed. Like, you're doing this incredible work that is for our future generations, and it's getting missed because of something so stupid. And so then it's like, where that gives me hope is that if we are able to open our eyes to more of the beauty, and by beauty, I mean like the intelligence, the kindness, the knowledge and the wisdom inside every single one of us, and from the earth, in the sea, all of nature, if we're able to see more of the beauty that's there, it's like it's there right in front of us, but hiding because so many people can't see it because of the way that these systems of oppression operate inside of them.
Totally, I agree. And this is the one thing that I keep telling the girls when I go out and do my talks. A lot of the girls, to inspire them to go into these fields, to inspire them to be ecologists and work on the field. Then I will say to them, you will have days where people will come and tell you, oh, you don't look pretty, or you look ugly because you're this and that. And I said, you have to expect it. So don't expect people to be nice to you, because it's not an easy road. But I can promise you it will be fulfilling at the end of the time, because there's no reason to go and give them the Hollywood talk where they think, oh, this sounds fabulous. And then they're like stunned. Like, I didn't have any role model to like admire and look at. And I didn't even know what I was going to face, especially when I was even doing my degree here in England. When I was doing my undergrad, I had a great group, but I was the only brown girl on the course. And at the time, we were only 12 students anyway. And they were all so lovely. And when we went out on the field, it was really funny because obviously, like, everybody was trying to get suntanned. And there was me trying to find the shade. And it was always that really comical role where I was just like, oh God, I'm going to go home and I'm going to get all these comments. And it was only through growing and realizing that what I'm doing is just ridiculous, that I need to break out of this way of thinking. And going back to that conversation, I started and didn't finish in terms of reflecting on the way we think or see things. When I was having that conversation with my friend who said that she's lucky because her children don't see color, and I didn't say anything. I didn't think about it much. And then I went away and I was reflecting on our conversation, and then reading mindlessly some articles online whilst having a cup of tea. And I realized, actually, not seeing color isn't necessarily a good thing, because if they don't see color, it means they don't see the broken system. Because then you won't see the difference in how people are actually being treated. again, it's about that difference between the 59 seconds and midnight. The thing that's there but not there. So we must make an effort to see the iniquity that we live in, to see the suffering. Just because we're uncomfortable doesn't mean we need to give it a blind eye. There is trouble, a troubled world that we cannot ignore because we're all part of it and we all play a role. And I completely agree with you. It's all about awareness, because there are things that we're not aware of, even within our own spaces of thinking. When we think we know certain things, but we don't realize there's yet another layer. It's like when you're healing, you're like, I'm fine. The normal triggers don't trigger me anymore. And then something, boom, happens. And then suddenly you're back to square zero and you're like, but I thought I just worked on this particular issue for over 2 years. Why am I back to square zero? So it's seeing deeper and deeper. It's not that we finished working with the issue, it's just that we were successful in removing one layer and now there's another one.
Yeah, for sure. I love the analogy of the spiral staircase for this, that like you're climbing this spiral staircase through your life, but the stuff on the walls is the same. You're just going to keep seeing it from a different angle and it's going to like look and feel different, but it's going to be the same things in your life because you are you have the story that you have the ancestry that you have. We live in the world that we live in, like it's not like you get to heal and transform and be somebody completely different. It's like you're still going to meet the same things. And at the same time, you have this opportunity to come closer to your true essence. And then as you do that, you liberate around you as well.
Yeah, no, totally.
I would love for you to share how you have handled being the woman that you are on this path that you have walked so far, where you haven't had role models and you've had a lot of people telling you like, that's not possible, you can't do that. And then all of these extra layers of things that have made it more difficult. Like, how have you kept the determination and the inspiration and the courage to keep going?
It's kind of like a different layer, isn't it? When I was a teenager, I found it really hard to make friends and keep friends because it was always the natural process, I think, anywhere in the world. When you go to school, people group up with people who are similar to them. But I never felt like I belonged anywhere because my ideas were too crazy. My ideas were something you don't talk about, like you old pretty girls would be together and they'd all talk about how they're going to marry their sons of influential families. And then the others would talk about how they just go into their family business and whatever. And there I was going, oh, I wanted to do marine biology and wanted to go to space. And people are like, wow, you're either up there or down there. There's something in the middle called, land. And I was like, yeah, there are too many of you. I want to go somewhere where I'm not forced to be around people.
And you're interested in what's above and below the surface.
Yeah, I was never interested in the surface because everybody around me was on it, And I was just thinking, wouldn't it be amazing to go into a world where I don't need to hide myself, because everything I said would aggravate negative things. Like people would just like look down on you. And then I thought to myself, I'd go home and then see my parents and go, no, they worked so hard for me to be where I am. I've got to work hard to give us a better life. And I need to work hard to give them back a bit of what because I'll never be able to give them back what they've given me because it's like more than the world.
You can give it forward.
Yeah, I can like do something to help. And I thought, okay, I believe there's a dream. And people always told me that I wasn't, like, obviously not straightforward of you're not good enough, but in the way where, people didn't want to associate with me because I was too ugly for the gang, or you wouldn't wear the brand clothes that they'd wear and blah, blah, blah. I just thought to myself, well, I don't need you. I don't need you. And my revenge for the horrible time I had is to achieve what I say I will achieve. And I remember I told everyone I was going to be a marine biologist, and people were like, yeah. And I still remember there was a group of girls in particular, and it was at the time where the brick Nokias, the Nokia phones. And I remember my parents bought our family one brick, and because I was the oldest, so I was in charge of everything. And I was just like, oh, this is the new phone. This is how we operate it. And my mum was like, okay, Reem can keep it and, take care of it and blah, blah, blah. And I remember there were these 5 girls in particular, led by our teacher, believe it or not, who would start sending me messages. And they were apparently at the time called facts, which now looking back, they weren't. It's about how a shark can sniff you from X miles and it will come and eat you up and you won't make it to the surface. And I still remember this because I'd look at it and I remember feeling flustered. You know that feeling in the bottom of your belly when you feel like you've been kicked, but like not physically?
Yeah, I know it.
Yeah. And I was just looking at this and I thought, okay, Reem, you've got 6 months to finish school. And then it's going to be a different story. Then you're free. You don't have to see these people and you don't have to read this anymore. You're going to leave. That's it. And once you get to England, it's a new chapter. And then when I got to England, it was all these little experiences, like what I experienced at the sandwich shop. It was another kind of torture, really, isn't it? Because it's just one thing transforming into another form. And I just thought, okay, you know what? It's fine. You're good. And I remember my manager always said to me, you're like the best member of staff I have. You're so reliable. You do everything you're told. I was just thinking, of course I do everything I'm told. I mean, I'm Bahraini, and at the time, the people, the normal local working class people, you always work hard, and you do what you're told, and that's that. All my colleagues would go out drinking and clubbing. And I was like, no, I've got to study because I need to make sure that I get my, the high marks that I can go back proudly with. And then I realized you could go for extra courses. I thought, I'm going to get 2 more jobs. I realized at one point I had 3 jobs. I was like tutoring children. I was working in the sandwich shop. And I was working at taking people on tours around the university as a student ambassador just to make it through. And then I saw rewards coming back, like life would suddenly land me a trip here and there. I'd get to a conference and people would be impressed at what I did. And I started seeing how the world was finally giving me the little doses that I needed to keep me going. Because after all that suffering, it's like I always imagined myself walking with my shoulders up, my head down, and people throwing things at me. That's how I was in my mind. And the aim was to get to a point where I could walk with my head high. And that's how I always pictured my journey. In my head, my journey was walking through these people and then finally walking into the forest. In the forest, all the trees were going to shield me. Everything that I work for will be there for me. And that's exactly how I motivated myself. And I just kept telling myself the only constant thing is change. And it can't be like this all of my life. And I refused for it. I really believed that I can change things. And I don't know where that belief has come from, but I think maybe it was that desperation to prove people who have kicked me in the face that this is possible from the island I come from, despite me not having the correct last name or coming from the correct tribe or the clan, or you know what I mean. And it was finally, I pulled through, and it was really funny when it finally happened. Like when I got my degree, I just thought, great, I've got a degree and I've got good marks. And next thing I know, I get an email saying, congratulations, you've won like a prize for best outstanding research. And I thought, oh, how is this even possible? And then I realized that because I worked hard, I wasn't just achieving what I wanted. It was little things were coming, like little blessings and miracles on the side. And when I went back, people didn't even recognize me. because it was like 5 years later. And I went back and I said, I'm going to do this. Of course, everybody was like, you're never going to get a job. You're going to work in the fish market. And they were like, yeah, she's going to work in the fish market. Well, that's going to be easy to find a man in the fish market, isn't it? I was like, well, yeah. Well, if that's where you want to find a man, well, please make your way to the fish market, because I ain't going to the fish market, love. If I'm going anywhere, it's going to be on the boat. Because if you want to be selling fish, at least I know that I will be the one who will be out there catching the fish. So you can sell it and sit on your ass all day, but I'm going to go do the work because that's where I want to be. When I got my first job, it was at a consultancy. Again, most of the staff were white, and it was always the dumb locals, the idiotic locals, the dumb locals. And I sat there and I thought to myself, how am I in the same position again? Like, damn it. It's like, and you're just like, seriously, I've just finished from the idiots behind me and now I have this to face. So this is where like building my ethics came into place, working in different countries, working with communities. I just refuse to settle. If someone doesn't treat someone with dignity and respect, I just refuse to settle. And I let it go on for about a year and about 3 months. And then a big incident happened. And I thought, enough's enough. And I actually stood up and I said, you know what? You're losing me. I'm leaving. And they were like, you can't leave because you'll never find a job ever on this island. You'll have to leave the country. And I thought to myself, I'll show you. I'll show you. I will not only find a job, but I will create a platform that will attract locals. And I will make sure we build a force of locals that you will be the guest. Finally, you will be the guest, not the one dominating, because it's exactly how it should be. We're all guests when we're in other countries. Whether it's our country or not, you must respect a human being. You must treat people with dignity. And yeah, life was very interesting. Not easy, but I did find another job. And I just swung from one tree to the other, really. I found my niche. And if a place would violate that, I would just leave. But thankfully, that also gave me a very good reputation in the country. So now everybody knows what I stand for, what I will allow, and what I will not allow. Everybody knows. And I'm still known as the aggressive one because that is the only way, apparently, I'm perceived when things are not how I think they should be in terms of treating people, or even just violating nature. Like if I see something that's not right, I will say it with no packaging. I'll just say it the way it is. But I must say I have earned the respect and the place within the country. And I'm very proud of it. And I'm sure it's a story that other girls I've heard of always say to me, like, when we hear your story, you really inspire us to do what you're doing. And it's happening.
And to risk being liked or pleasing people or judged and being like, okay, call me the aggressive one, whatever, if that's how you have to relate. But I'm going to stand by my values and make this world more beautiful and make this island more beautiful.
Totally. Because in the end of the day, not everyone's going to like you. And knowing that as well within myself and accepting that was a huge thing. So that helped me with my journey, accepting that I won't be liked by a lot of people, and that's okay. And then also learning to tame my ego when it's necessary, because it's really easy when you're aggravated to let your ego take over. And with the years, I have learned that to listen. Like I will have my outburst, but that outburst will be private. And then I will reflect on it and go, okay, let's keep the ego on the side and let's look for the better good for everyone here. And that helps a lot, because it's okay to let your ego sit on the side and let the other ego take over when you know it's for the common good. And that helps a lot.
And so, as a closing question, I would love for you to share with us more about the work that you're doing right now and what you're hoping to do when you get back to Bahrain next week.
Yeah. So the work I'm doing at the moment is I'm working on something called reef budgets. So you can literally think about it like a bank account. So if you put money in the bank, you're in a positive state as long as you're not withdrawing more than you're putting in. And if you're withdrawing with no input, then you're in a negative state. And reefs are like that with how they build themselves. So I am trying to assess the health of reefs in different countries that are island nations to see whether the reefs are in a positive state and whether island stability will be threatened because of sea level rise. There's over 2.5 million people around the world that rely directly on reefs for their livelihoods. And we have 70% really of populations on these islands that completely rely on reefs to protect them from storms and tsunamis and much bigger things. So my work is directly related to that, the question of how we're going to feed people by 2050. On islands where vegetables don't grow, it's not feasible to tell people to go vegan. It's not feasible to tell people to go follow a certain diet. And especially when it comes to poorer coastal communities that have relied all their lives on the nature around them to provide for them. So that's the work I do in terms of the research that I look into. On the other thing, as to what I want to do when I get back to Bahrain, one of the first things I want to do is establish a marine biology and environmental science degree. Because until today in the country, locals cannot access a degree in environmental science or marine biology, a bachelor's degree in their own country. They have to leave the country to access degrees such as that. Everyone deserves an opportunity to study what they want to study, and everybody deserves access to education. It's a basic human right. And that's what I'm going to work on and take people out on the reef so they can familiarize themselves with their own country's nature.
Beautiful. And in terms of the research that you're doing, what hope do you see for 2050?
I think it's really easy to feel very like doom and gloom with the news nowadays, with everything from plastic oceans to the craze and the bleaching and everything. But I, as someone studying reefs and looking at the evolutionary perspective of reefs have existed from years and years, from time the ages just to with dinosaur times and after, and they've gone through so many different eras, including the Pleistocene times, the Holocene, and now the Anthropocene. And what people don't realize is that we don't have faith in nature. We think we do, but we don't. But in reality, these reefs have existed through time and space. And the only difference is that they have changed in their forms and structure. So by 2050, maybe our reefs won't exist in the form that we know or are familiar with. They will change in the way they look. But I personally believe that they will pull through. It's about more us being able to pull through with them and alongside them. I'm hopeful. I think there's so many people who are contributing towards creating a beautiful future. I have hope in every single soul out there working in their own way, whether it's through working for human rights, through feeding people, working on healing themselves. We're all contributing towards it. So I have hope.
Beautiful. Thank you, Reem, so much for your time. How can people contact you or follow what you're doing?
First, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure having this conversation with you, Amisha. I'm really grateful. And thank you for all that you do to make the world and to make the future beautiful. People can contact me through my website, which is www.reemalmealla.com, or through my Instagram account, which is at RMEALLA. I'm sure we'll have the links down for people to reach out.
We will have the links, totally.
Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for spending your precious time with us. As always, you can find links to everything we mention in this episode, download our book, and discover so much more over on the blog. We don't believe in selling you things you don't need through this podcast, and so it's made possible with you, our community. If you loved this and would like to fund our show with a monthly donation or join our online group to connect with other listeners, please visit www.thefutureisbeautiful.co and click on Community and Support. Please also share with friends, hit subscribe, and leave us a review so we can grow. Those gold stars really help others find us, so these ideas can spread. Here is to us, creating a beautiful future together. The Future is Beautiful is made by an all-female team working voluntarily or on reduced rates until our listener support grows. If you have been moved by anything you heard here, please donate the equivalent of buying us a drink. All donations make a huge difference to us and will allow us to keep doing this and remain advertising free. Until next time, I leave you with this question. How will you create beauty in the world?